Welcome to The Crossing. There's a lot of things that you could have done today, but you chose to be here, and I couldn't be more grateful that you are. We're in our second week of our series called It's Personal. If you've ever wondered what the personal and intimate personal relationship with Jesus is all about, then you're in the right place. It's going to be an incredible sermon, and I can't wait to get into it. Here at The Crossing, we are all about building relationships, and we're not going to let online stop us from that. So come join us in the chat. We would love to talk with you and get to know you better. All right, service is getting ready to start. We've got some amazing worship coming up before the sermon. Thanks for joining in.
You are my shepherd guiding me. You give me everything I need. Oh, I know that you love me. You lay me down in pastures green. You lead me by the quiet streams. Oh, I know that you love me. Jesus, you are good, and your love endures. In your presence I abide, in your shelter I'm secure. Jesus,
Well, how's everybody doing today? You guys doing all right? So glad to see every single one of you. To those of you joining here at 48th Street, and to those of you joining at our locations all across this region, to those of you who are part of the Crossing Inside, the Crossing.tv, and of course the Crossing Online, I want to welcome you as well. We are so thankful we get to interact with you and be a part of what God is doing in us, through us, and around us. And to those of you who are joining us for the very first time, we're so glad that you're here. And we hope that God will use today's time together to draw you closer to Him and help you find an intimate, personal relationship with Jesus Christ. If you're new to our church or if you've been coming here for a while, you know that this is an exciting time for us as we're getting ready to launch our newest location next weekend in Monmouth, Illinois. Yeah, we could not be more excited. Casey Grant, who's going to be the campus pastor there, is one of my closest friends. And when he decided that he wanted to be a part of this, it's been unbelievably cool. And I brought a surprise. I've got a sneak peek into the building so that you guys can actually see what we've been doing. Hundreds of volunteer hours have been put in. This is the Armory. It's an unbelievably huge facility. We worked with the city, got an incredible deal. We're repainting everything that we can possibly repaint. Everything that we've been doing has been applied to our rent payments, which keeps it down super low. This is our early childhood area, repainted all this, put down carpet. We took this place from being pretty rough and have turned it into quite a nice facility. Our tech team has been working nonstop, super thankful for them. The Macomb campus has been working unbelievably hard, super thankful for you guys. A bunch of people from Monmouth who were like, you're gonna put a church in our backyard? We wanna be a part of it, have been showing up and putting in a bunch of time. Now check out this room. This is gonna be like our biggest auditorium. You ready for this? Oh, I did this last service. Okay, they're gonna show you this room, which is one of the rooms we're using for our children's ministry, and behind that door's more. Now, I don't know how they open these doors. This is, because they're not automatic, but look at that thing. That screen is the largest screen of all of our locations. So that way in that big room, it feels good. So Jerry and I will be like 20 feet tall. This thing is absolutely gorgeous, just a beautiful facility. And we're hoping that inside of there, we're gonna be putting up some pipe and drape, but next week I'm praying for 300 people to be a part of that opening day. And here's what I could ask of you. Yeah, isn't that incredible? I'm asking all of you to pull out your phone and set your alarm for 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And from now until next Sunday, at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., would you just pray for the Monmouth launch? There's gonna be about 8,000 people that are gonna come to our church this weekend and hear this message. And if all of us were to do that, we could basically, or most of us do it, we could get to 50,000 prayers before they open. And how cool would it be to be able to look at somebody in Monmouth and say, hey, you just came in here today, but I want you to know there are 50,000 prayers for you to be here. And I'm hoping that there's gonna be a baptism on opening weekend. We got a baptistry, we got it warmed up. So would you just join me, setting your alarm 9 a.m., 9 p.m. because it opens on the 9th. And let's just lift up 50,000 prayers. Next thing I wanna tell you is the next week when we launch that location, we're gonna be starting a brand new sermon series here at our church, and it's called The Mandela Effect. And I could not be more excited about this sermon series. There's gonna be some unbelievably cool things that are gonna happen as a result of it. But here's what I want you to know. This is a great sermon series for you to invite a friend. Sometimes people will say, hey, I've got a friend I wanna bring to church. When's a really good time to do it? This is the time. For the next 8 weeks, we're gonna be giving people a brand new, a fresh look at what it means to have a relationship with God, because a lot of people believe things about God that are not true, and so we're gonna dispel those lies. So if you are ever going, you know what, I need the courage, I need the right opportunity, this is gonna be that opportunity. Along with that, we're gonna be sending out a poll every single week at thecrossing.net/poll, and if you go there, you can actually fill out and answer questions that will inform the messages that we preach. So the more people that tie in and click on and answer the survey questions, the more we're gonna be able to accurately answer some of the questions that people have, and it's gonna inform how we preach the sermons, because we wanna make it interactive. Our goal is to actually be able to do some of this live while we're actually preaching, which will be really fun. So this is gonna be a really fun series. So for the next 8 weeks, you be here, and I really want to encourage you to bring some of your friends, because I think it could be life-altering for them. Well, we're in a sermon series called It's Personal. And last week, Jerry and Allison got up and they talked about what God's been doing in their life and through their 20-year ministry here and 38 years of ministry in total. And they kind of talked about one of it's personal, is that how God used a study and a ministry to kind of form the phrase intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And that not only formed the foundation of their ministry, but it kind of formed the foundation of this church and for many of us as individuals. I don't know how many times I have heard someone say, I had no idea that I could have an intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And so we're so blessed because of it. But there was another thing that they said in the middle of that message that really kind of resonated with me, and I wanted to revisit for just a second. They said they moved from doing things for Jesus to doing things with Jesus. And there's a big difference between doing things for Jesus and doing things with Jesus. And I was just so moved when I heard that. I wanted to make sure I put that in front of you in case you missed it, that that's something we all need to be pushing towards. Well, what I want to do is I want to talk to you about something that's personal to me. Now, before I get there, I need to accurately set this up. So if you were to leave all of our locations and drive to Carthage, Illinois, to their Dairy Queen, and you were to sit in the south east corner near the window, you would be sitting almost exactly where Jennifer and I sat on our first non-date. Now, I call it a non-date because on the drive there, she said, "Is this a date?" And I said, "No." She eventually, it might have been. But anyhow, we sat down, and while I was there, I ordered probably the greatest thing you can order at a fast food restaurant. Actually, Dairy Queen is not fast food, and I apologize. Dairy Queen is fan food fast. But I ordered the greatest thing that you can get if you were to go through a drive-through. And how many of you guys know that I'm speaking? Yeah, you know. And you guys also know what makes this the greatest thing that you can get. What is it? Yeah, everybody knows. It's amazing. I'm speaking truth right now. Now, many of you probably, if you don't know what I'm talking about, or even if you have, I want to just kind of give you some inside information on how to properly handle yourself if you find yourself in this position. One, it's best to get 2 cups of gravy, okay? The rookie takes what's there. The smart Christian asks for a double dose of the Holy Ghost, okay? So you get 2 of these, and here's why you get 2 of these. First of all, you're going to start with the bread because the bread will get soggy first. So you start with that and you dip the bread in the gravy. That's exactly right. Once the bread is out of the way, you can easily access the fries. And you are going to dip the fries in that's exactly right. And you might be going, but I'm worried about my chicken getting cold. Won't happen because in their design, they wrapped it in this breadcrumbs, which holds the heat inside. And so when you do open it after you've consumed the bread and the fries, it will still be steaming. And then you will dip the chicken strips in you understand. Now, after you do that, this can't happen everywhere, but I just want you to know it happens to me 80% of the time if I ask for it. Because I know things about Dairy Queen. First of all, there's a secret menu. You can go up to any Dairy Queen I've ever been to, and you can ask for the cookie jar blizzard. You won't find it anywhere on any of their menus, but it exists. They know exactly what to do. Here's what the cookie jar is. Chocolate chip cookie dough and Oreo in the same blizzard. Now, I'm going to tell you something that they don't tell anybody. If you ask really nice, with a great smile, and you look at that person who's working that register and you vision cast, and you say, do you want to do something just incredible? I mean, you're going to wait on a lot of people today, but do you want to make a memory with me right now in this moment? This could be something special that you and I both remember for a very long time. This is not an ordinary order. This could be special. Do you want to go on a special journey with me? You vision cast it. What do you say? Instead of you just putting ice cream in it, you stop about halfway. And then you go back in the back where you store the icing for the birthday cakes, and you put the icing on top. And that is the rest of, guess what? 80% of the time, I get that deal done. And if you think you've had good Dairy Queen, you have not. Because if you can coax some icing out of them in place of ice cream, now if you do the whole thing in icing, which has been done by somebody on this stage, I will tell you it's too much, okay? It is too much. But if you stop halfway. Now listen, every time I go to a Dairy Queen, it takes me back to those moments with my wife. Like, I remember that day. I remember we took our first selfie together. Like, I cannot see a Dairy Queen advertisement and it not take me back to her. The same is true with sweet tea. Grandma, my grandma made sweet tea. How many of you guys had a grandma that made legit sweet tea? I'm talking sweet tea. The kind of sweet tea that made your dentist's second home a possibility. That's what I'm talking about. And I remember going to her fridge and opening it up, and she kept Copenhagen in there for all of her kids and grandkids. She had to slide that out of the way, and you could grab a pitcher of sweet tea. And the moment I even think about any kind of tea, I'm immediately taken back to her carpeted kitchen. I remember seeing the window over the sink that looked out in the pastures in western Missouri, and I could see the horses and the cows grazing in the pasture. And I remember in the back there was a screen door, and the door was there was a sliding glass door that was open that had the screen door shut, and there was a hummingbird that was always there at the feeder. And then behind that you could hear the creek. I'm just immediately transported. Anytime I think of tea or sweet tea, I think of grandma, and I get taken aback. The reason why is because these are food memories. And yeah, you guys, this is a real thing. And food memories are some of the most powerful memories we have, because food memories require all 5 senses. It does something to us. All of us, we've experienced this, whether it's over a 4th of July barbecue, a Thanksgiving meal, a Christmas dinner. For my family, we do a Labor Day cookout every year, and this year it's at my house, so right after church, I'm doing a low country boil, and I want to get this sermon over so I could get home and start putting that happen. Can't wait. And I know that in that moment, memories are going to be made and memories are going to be remembered. There's something powerful that happens. Some of you, when you got married, you didn't realize that food memories were a real deal until you started to have conflict. You hear your wife talking all the time about how she doesn't want to hang out with her family because they're rude, they don't like, da. And so you suggested, hey, well, let's just not go to their house this Thanksgiving. And she was like, how dare you? And you're like, well, I thought, you keep telling me how much you don't like him. Yeah, but we all sit, and we sit around the table in a certain way, and I sit next to so-and-so, and we talk about, and then they start talking about the certain food that's there. And there's certain foods that are actually called grandma's blank, because it's that important. Or ladies, you found out that your husband liked meatloaf. And one Saturday, while he was working really, really hard outside, you go, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to surprise him, and I'm going to make some meatloaf. I'm going to make the best meatloaf he has ever had. And so you slave in that kitchen all day. And he comes in, he's hot and sweaty, and he sits down at the table, and you're like excited. You present what you believe to be this Michelin-level meal, and you put it in front of him, and he just eats. He gets done. Well, did you like it? Yeah, it was good. Just good. Okay. All right. Ungrateful. That's who you are. How good was it? Oh, yeah, it was good. Thanks, babe. I mean, you know I like meatloaf. Okay. And deep down inside your head, what you want to ask is, well, is it better than your... Yeah, than your mom's. Yeah. Okay, now listen, your meatloaf is actually probably better. He just made the food memory with his mom's. If you want the best meatloaf in the world, though, you can go to my Facebook page, because my wife makes meatloaf cupcakes. Now you know why I'm fat. On top, where the icing should be, is mashed potatoes. I lost the guy. Guy came after me after first service, said, I didn't hear the rest of your sermon. I heard meatloaf cupcakes, and I was gone. I said, that's fine. You can come to Steps next week. We have these food memories, and they're powerful, and they impact us in profound ways. Well, part of that is actually maybe woven in by God himself, because God would institute these meals designed to recall us back to special moments in our spiritual journey. In fact, he did the very first meal like this with the Israelites. The Israelites, the people of God, the Jews, as you guys have maybe heard of them before, were in Egypt, and they had been in slavery for 400 years, and they cried out to God, please deliver us. And God heard their prayer, and he sent a man named Moses. And on the night before they were delivered from the Egyptians, they were called to have a meal. And the meal was called the Passover. And one of the things that they would do is after they killed the animal for the meat, they would take the blood and they would put the blood over the doorframe of their house. And when the Lord came out to judge all the people of the land, if he saw blood on the house, he would pass over. Well, the Jews continued to do this meal for generations. And there were elements of this meal, all sorts of them. But that is and every time they would gather, the young son would ask the father, what does this all mean? And then the father in the home would recount the entire story of the Israelite people being delivered from the Egyptians by the hand of God. And there's all sorts of stuff that would happen inside this meal, but I'm just gonna focus on the 4 cups. If this was Sesame Street, today's message is brought to you by the number 4. That's exactly right. There were 4 cups. Cup number 1. Cup number 1 was served downstairs with the hors d'oeuvres. And each cup, there was a line that was taken out of Exodus chapter 6, verses 6 through 7. So cup 1 was, they would take the first cup and they would say this phrase, I am the Lord and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. Then they would go upstairs and they would get ready for the meal. And before they had the meal, they would take the second cup. And the second cup was, I will free you from being slaves to them. And then they would have the meal. And there's all sorts of significance about the meal, but in between the second cup and the third cup, they would eat the meal. And then after they'd finished the meal, they would have the third cup. And the third cup was, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I want everybody to remember cup number 3 because we're going to get back to it in just a second. So I'll redeem you with everybody say this word, outstretched arm and with mighty acts of, okay, we're going to get back to that. Then at the very end, when they were all done, they would do the 4th cup. And the 4th cup was, I will take you as my own people and I will be your God. Now, this happens 1,500 years before Jesus, and it's been happening, and it still happens today. Proper Jewish people will still celebrate the Passover meal, and they will go through the entire ritual. They will do the whole thing. But fast forward 1,500 years after the initial Passover meal, Jesus, who was a Jew, gathers his disciples on the Thursday before he dies on Friday, and they get together to celebrate the Passover meal. And they get together and Jesus starts to walk his disciples through the Passover meal. So they have cup number 1 and then they get ready to have cup number 2. And this is what it says in Luke chapter 22. After taking the cup, he gave thanks and said, take this and divide it among you. And the disciples started to go, something's different here. And then they go into the meal. And this is what it says in Luke 22:19. And he took bread, gave thanks and broke it and gave it to them saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And the disciples were going, I thought we were talking about what God did for the Israelites under the Egyptians. And then this is the meal. So this is in between cup 2 and cup 3. Then we go to cup 3. And this is what it says. In the same way, after the supper, he took the cup saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you. And the disciples had to be going, this is the weirdest Passover meal ever. Now listen to me. What Jesus is saying is that this Passover meal that you've been celebrating forever, not just commemorates what happened all the way back in Exodus, but it actually reveals what is about to happen in front of all of you right now. Now, those of us who are Christians, we know that from this, we realize that that is what we now call communion. And every single week when we gather as a church across all of our locations, we take this meal. We come up and we engage in communion, which is basically a simplified version of the Passover meal that Jesus twisted and said, you know what, this is the new revealed meaning. Think about this. The old Passover was all about people being rescued from slavery and oppression and being brought into freedom. And when we remember communion, we are reminded of what Jesus Christ did on our behalf. I said that this message was brought to you by the number 4. There were 4 cups. Well, there are 4 looks when we take communion. Look number 1 is we look backwards. This is what it says in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 22. In fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. You and I, we are not forgiven if it is not covered by the blood. The difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament is the blood of Jesus Christ. He purchased the new covenant, the new contract between us and God. And I said at the beginning, I want you to remember cup number 3, where it says, I will redeem them with an outstretched arm and will reveal mighty acts of. When you hear that, cup number 3, do you not see Jesus on a cross redeeming you and me with an outstretched arm? And do you not see God revealing a mighty act of judgment, except that mighty act of judgment is not on you or me, it's actually on Jesus. When we take communion, we look all the way back to what Jesus Christ did on the cross on behalf of you and on behalf of me. Well, not only do we look backwards, but we look forwards. That's the second look. Many people believe that Jesus did not drink the 4th cup. He drank the 1st cup, the 2nd cup, the 3rd cup. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to talk about the 5th cup, which he drank all of, but he did not drink the 4th cup. Listen to what Jesus says right here in Matthew 26, verse 29. I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. We get to look forward to heaven. When you take communion, you get to realize that Jesus is saying, I'm not drinking the 4th cup until I get to drink it with you. What that means is like there's a heavenly Starbucks date with you and Jesus. We're like, I've been waiting until I get to eat, or until I get to drink this with you. He's writing you. If you have an intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ, he is going to drink the 4th cup, the final cup of the Passover meal, the final cup of the new covenant. He's going to drink it, but he's waiting for you. Not only do we look forward, not only do we look backwards, not only do we look forward, but we also look inwards. 1 Corinthians 11 says this, therefore, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of sinning against the body and the blood of the Lord. Sounds a little scary. So a man ought to examine himself before he eats of the bread and drinks of the cup. You see this verse at all of our locations every time we're getting ready to take communion. Now, some of you, if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, somebody may have told you at some point in time, hey, you don't need to be worried about taking communion. Or if you were brought up in the church, you didn't take communion until you got baptized. The reason why people would say that or do that is, how can you remember something done on your behalf until you've accepted something done on your behalf? That it doesn't make sense to go and remember Jesus' body on the cross until you've said, I realize what he's done for me and I want what he's done for me. That's why that's in there. So when we go to take communion, we're supposed to look inward and go, God, what's right in my life and what's wrong in my life? What adjustments do I need to make? We look inwardly and we go, man, God, is everything right? There's some changes that I can make or that I need to make. We look outward, or we look forward, we look backward, we look inward, but we also look outward. We look out to realize that Jesus' death on the cross was not just for us. Well, here's why this message is personal to me. I remember when I started to follow Jesus that I was taking communion on a pretty regular basis. And then when I was in college, I was like, I hope to be a part of a church that's big enough that it has multiple services. And then I started to go, man, I'm going to be, taking a lot of communion. And then I read this verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. For anyone who eats and drinks without recognizing the body of the Lord eats and drinks judgment on himself. And I got a little freaked out. Because if I'm going to be taking communion all the time, I don't need any extra judgment on me in case I get it wrong. And then I started to think, I always sit up towards the front. So when it comes to communion time, and for the most part, most of you guys aren't super judgy people, but I mean, I'm a big guy, I'm hard to miss, and I was starting to go, well, if I only do communion on Thursdays, then the Sunday crowd will think, well, Clayton doesn't even take communion. Does he even love the Lord? And then the problem was I came up with a way that I was going to take communion, and I ended up taking double communion. So then I'm starting to worry that people are like, is Clayton hungry? I mean, really, the Lord's Supper, Clayton? I mean, you're chunky, but really, the Lord? So I'm going, what do I do here? But the bottom line is I did not want to eat and drink judgment upon myself, because this is supposed to be a very special moment. It reminds me of when we went on vacation to Washington, D.C. And I'll tell you, of all the places I've been on vacation, Washington, D.C. was my favorite vacation. Because when we were going through all the memorials, like you were just moved and impacted every day. I remember when we went to the World War II monument. It was crazy what happened. The closer you got to the World War II monument, like the smarter people got, the more common sense they had. Like loud, boisterous people who were laughing and joking, the closer they got to the World War II material, they started to speak in hushed tones. All the smokers, they didn't ash on the ground and put it out with their feet at the World War II memorial. They walked away to do it. People would take their hats off as they got closer to it. Kids that have no sense, they could sense, we're gonna get beat if we don't get it together quick. Right? The whole place just transformed. And as you're walking through it, you're just taken back, and all of a sudden I saw out off to the left, I saw the Western Wall. And I saw this huge wall that just had a bunch of gold on it. And I got closer, and you could see all the gold stars. And I got closer, and then you see a plaque that says that each one of these stars represents 100 lives that were lost in World War II. And there are 4,048 stars. That's over 400,000 people. And at the bottom, there's a plaque, and it says, "Here we mark the price of freedom." And how could I stand at the World War II, and even though I wasn't alive, I was not there, I don't remember it, but I knew that in that moment, this was a special place designed to help me realize that a price had been paid, a sacrifice had been made, and that I had to do something with it. And it is that holy attitude that you and I are supposed to bring to communion. That when we gather around the Lord's table, it's not something that's supposed to be flippant. It's supposed to be something that's transformational, that moves us and changes us. And so, like I said, this sermon's brought to you by the number 4. I pray 4 prayers every time I take communion. And so this is what I do. The first prayer I pray is, God, thank you so much for dying on the cross for my sins and paying a price I could not pay. No matter how good I am, no matter how hard I work, no matter how many wonderful things I may do on behalf of Jesus, I racked up a bill I could not pay. But he paid it. When I was out of college, I got a credit card, and I racked up a credit card bill that was 25% of my annual income. And I remember calling my parents and going, "We've got a problem." Which, just so you know, if you're a good vision caster, put them on the same team with you, not on opposing teams. So what do we think we should do about this with our money? Okay? Listen, my parents are great parents. They bailed me out. I eventually paid them back. But I remember having to make that call and going, I owe a debt I cannot pay. And I remember the feeling of my dad covering me in that moment. You and I, we have racked up a bill that we cannot even fathom. And he paid it. And it wasn't a small bill, it cost him his life. Every sin that I've committed was an extra thorn in his brow. Every sin that I've committed was an extra blow of the hammer as it drove the nails into his hands. Every single one of those. He paid a price I could never pay. So how can I be flippant? So when I gather around this table, I'm remembering that he covered me in a way that I could never be covered, that because of his blood, God's judgment passes over me. I pray, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for dying on the cross for my sins and paying a price I could not pay. And thank you for never giving up on me, even though I deserve it. Thank you for never giving up on me, even though I deserve it. I know some of you think you're God's favorite, and I think that's cute. And I know some of you think that God was super excited to have you on the team. I get that. He was not excited when he got me. The angels in heaven weren't going, oh, we finally got Clayton. Woo! We're going to need him. Gabriel, Michael were not going, oh God, it would just change everything if Clayton was to give his life to you. No. They were going, oh, here comes another hypocrite. Except this one's loud. That's what they are. Oh, you sure, Jesus? He's like, yeah, I love him. Can't help it. Man, he could have walked away. Do you know how many chances I've had today Think if the angels gave God the same kind of advice that you give people in a bad marriage. Well, you should really get out of there. He's bad news. You're going to take him back again? You're really going to go back to her like after the way she treats you? And that's after like one or two bad moments. Think about your relationship. How many times have you gone back and said, hey, God, you remember that time I prayed that I'd never do that again? And I was super serious that time? Well, I did it again because I'm an idiot. You still love me? And he goes, yeah, I do. I do not deserve all the chances he gives me, but he gives them to me. And I want to make sure I'm thankful for that it's not lost on me. His grace is not lost on me. The third thing I pray as I get ready to take the first cup of juice is I go, man, God, help me to live a life in response to your love. I mean, how can I live in the shadow of a bloodstained cross? How can I realize that he paid a price that I could not pay? How can I, after looking and realizing that he's given me chance after chance after chance, and not be moved by it, transformed by it, changed by it? The difference between a religion and a relationship is the things I do as a part of my relationship with Jesus Christ is because of what he's done for me. Because when I take communion, I'm reminded of all that he's done for me, and I'm swooned to want to do things with him. And then the last prayer I pray, and this one's the toughest one. The last one I pray is, man, God, help me to remember you didn't die for just me, but for everybody in the world. Now this one's tough. How many of you know somebody you don't like? At all of our locations, put your hand up. The rest of you, you're lying, which Jesus had to pay on the cross for that sin, so quit it. Okay, if you could hit somebody and get away with it, like if you got an invisible cloak, you could, okay? How many of you work with somebody that if they called in sick on Tuesday, you'd be like, there is a God, wow, okay? How many of you at Thanksgiving, there's gonna be people there that it would be great if they went to see their other family? Here's the crazy thing. The worst boss that you've ever worked for, the gossipy coworker that drives you insane, he died for them too. You think they're the scum of the earth, and he thought that they were worthy of his death. And if you take communion and all you get out of it is how much he loves you, and you don't realize how much he loves the world, we miss something. There's not a person you're gonna bump into that Jesus didn't love enough to die for. That we're actually not all that special. The only thing that makes us special is the fact that he loves us, but he loves everybody. The worst jerk, he goes, I'll die for him. The person you can't stand, heaven asks, who will die on that? And Jesus raised his hand and said, I will. And as Christians, we've got to realize that all the people we meet and all the people we interact with, he's in love with. And our job is to help them find and encounter that love. So when we take communion, it's this holy moment where we get to look forwards and backwards and inwards and outwards, and we get the opportunity, if you want, to pray these prayers to help have a moment that is transformational to the way that we live and the way that we love him. We're moving to a time of decision.
Today we're going to do something a little different. Clayton's sermon ended on 4 different prayers. They're an incredible example of what a prayer is supposed to be during this time. So that's what I want to do. I want each of us to focus in on these 4 prayers, spending time on each one. The first one is, thank you for dying on the cross for my sins and paying a price I could not pay. Let's spend some time praying about that right now. The second prayer is, thank you for not giving up on me, even though I deserve it. The third is, help me to live a life in response to your love. And the last is, help me to remember you did not just die for me, but for everyone in the world. Now together, let's spend some time in worship thanking God for what He's done.
Love
I just want to encourage you to pray to God, pray out to Him.
Redesign the tattered thread by thread. You take the broken and destroy. You rebuild. You make whole. Joy begin to rise and hope begin to light the dark. I gotta change his hope for New Year's dawn.
Every week we remember what Jesus did for us on the cross. We take a piece of bread and a cup of juice. It's a representation of his body and his blood, and we take it in remembrance of his sacrifice. Whether you have anything with you or not, let's spend the next few moments thanking him for his sacrifice. Let's do that right now. Thank you so much for joining with us today. If you haven't already, hit the give button at the top of the screen and start being a difference maker in our online community. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me by emailing joeyh@thecrossing.net. I'd love to answer any questions that you have. Once again, thanks for joining in, and I'll see you next week.